to go ahead and get started. It's about 11 o'clock. Thank you guys all for coming. My name is Rick Rodriguez. You guys are all here to hear about the story of my boat Raindancer and when it was hit by a whale on the way to French Polynesia. The boat sank in less than 20 minutes, and I think that there's a lot that can be taken from that experience, a lot of things that were done right, that were done wrong, that could have been done better, and I've decided to put that all together and share that with you guys here today. Quick show of hands, how many people have done passages for, let's just say, more than 2 nights of sailing in the audience? Okay, good, so you guys kind of know what I'm talking about. How many people haven't done passages but maybe intend to do stuff like that in the future? Okay, awesome. All right, so let's see. That's not really how I thought that was going to work. So this is kind of what the seminar is going to go through. A quick background about myself. I grew up in Florida, in the Florida Keys. I've been in the sailing and yachting industry one way or another connected to that for about 9-10 years now. I've owned 3 of my own boats. I've worked on a lot of different larger sailing yachts and motor yachts up to about 160 feet. I have a U.S. Coast Guard 200-ton captain's license, and I'm currently working as a marine surveyor. I'm a member of the Society of Accredited Marine Surveyors. I'm spending half the year in Bellingham, Washington, based over there, and in the winter months in West Palm Beach, Florida. So this is just a map of the South Pacific, and just a quick introduction of the South Pacific kind of meant a lot to me. It was, I think in 2012, my obsession with it began, and it was just something that was really important for me to do. I was like, I want to learn how to sail. I want to make as much money so that I can buy my own boat and sail there on my own terms, have the freedom to do all that. And it was something that I pretty much strived for from when I got into yachting in 2014 up until I ended up getting this boat and doing this trip. So much to where in 2021, the girl that I was dating at the time, we were running catamaran charters in the Bahamas, and it had been a rough year or two. My dad had passed away with COVID, with all the challenges that COVID presented for running charters in the Bahamas. Considering everything, we were actually doing okay business-wise, but we just weren't happy. And my girlfriend, she would see my obsession with looking at boats at late hours of the night, looking at Yacht World and looking at charts in the South Pacific, Google Earth, and trying to plan it. And one day she was just like, Rick, she's like, we have to stop this. You need to go do this because you can't move on with your life until you've done this trip. And she kind of gave me her blessing. I was like, man, you understand me. This girl really gets me. So we ended up going our separate ways, and a few months later, I ended up flying up to Staten Island, New York. Found this Kelly Peterson 44 that had been sitting on the hard for about 5 years. It needed a lot of work, but I got it for a good price, and I decided to pull the trigger, and this would be the boat that would kind of take me to the South Pacific. So there's just some extra photos of the boat. That was in the Bahamas. There's on the way to the Galapagos, and we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, I remember after getting the boat, just coming down the East Coast, after I bought it in New York with friends, and it was the best I've felt in forever. Since my dad passed away, I was just the ultimate freedom for a young man. It's nothing better in the world, just coming down the East Coast. And we made our way from New York to Panama, did a lot of big refit projects on the boat along the way, shared the boat with a lot of good friends, as you do. And then in, it was January of 2023, we were at Shelter Bay Marina in Panama, getting ready to transit the Panama Canal. We went through the Panama Canal, and then this was, just to give you guys some context of who was on the boat. This is actually a photo of us after our boat sank. We were rescued. This was our first moments on land after 23 days at sea. So you see, basically, our only belongings were clothes that were donated to us and safety gear. So this is the crew that was on board. From right to left, there's Simon Fisher. He didn't really, his only sailing experience had been basically, I roped him into helping me with boat projects. He had just suffered a lot helping me, and then we did one passage to the Galapagos, and then boat got hit by a whale and sank. And then I'm here in the middle, and then next over is Alana Litch. She was a firefighter in the Canadian military. Had a little bit of sailing experience up in the Pacific Northwest, but mostly like inside passage stuff. And she was still like getting used to sailing and everything. At the time, we had become pretty close, and we were actually dating at the time of the accident. And then next over, there's Bianca Bratnew, and she was somebody I brought on board because she also had her Yachtmaster license, and she had just done an Atlantic crossing. I wanted somebody on board who had also had some serious ocean miles, just to like help with some sailing, since everybody else was pretty new. And there's also fun fact that's kind of unrelated, but I should mention all of these people at one time or another were actually strangers that I met on the internet. Yeah. Mentally unstable strangers, not. They're all good friends now. And then so this was that's just a photo of the Bay of Virgins. I had actually gone through the South Pacific on a boat that I was working on. I think 3 or 4 years before that. But I'd always wanted to do it on my own terms. But this is like my iconic anchorage. I always had. It's a pretty famous spot. It's like cover page of a bunch of different magazines, and I was just focused on that's where we were planning on making landfall when we left the Galapagos. Just going to that beautiful spot. So here's the track of our boat. We went through the Panama Canal, left Panama, I think around like February 1st or something. Sailed to the Galapagos, had a good trip, spent 3 weeks in the Galapagos, and then we took off from the Galapagos, I think February 28th. And we were having a great passage, considering the winds were a bit light that year. They were transitioning from La Nina to El Nino, so you can get some light winds during that. But I think day 11, we hit our halfway point, and then 2 days later, we hit a bit of a bump in the road. That's when the whole accident happened. It was just a normal day. That was March 13th. Good typical trade wind, southeast sailing winds. And we were just having lunch. I just talked to my mom on the phone, and I was like, "Yeah, Mom, it's not really a whole lot that can go wrong out here. At the weather." The weather's looking really good. Like we're just making lunch and hanging out in the cockpit reading books as you do on long passages, and then 3 hours later the boat was deeper than the Titanic, the ocean. So we were just having lunch. Bianca was making some pizza, and I was getting the first batch of pizza had come out. It was delicious. Pizza was a little bit late that day, so we were hungry. Me and Simon were a little bit upset about that. So the second pizza came out. I was getting ready to take my first bite of pizza, and before I could take the bite is when we felt the huge impact. And it was basically, it's like, picture being in the back of a school bus, sitting in the back and hitting a massive speed bump. That was like the kind of the motion of the impact. So we got hit in the stern of our boat. The whole boat lifted up. The rig shook really violently. There was a very loud, metal clanking, crashing noise, and then a sound of fiberglass breaking. It did not sound good at all. My first reaction was to go grab the wheel for some reason, and I right away noticed that we had lost steering. And then Alana looked over and saw the whale, and she just yelled, "We hit a whale!" And we all look over off the port side, and it was so close we could have just reached down and touched it, and it was bleeding really badly at that point. And then right on cue after that, the high water bilge alarm went off. So water was coming in really fast. I ran down below, went into the engine room just to verify what direction the water flow was coming in from. It was coming in from the stern, and just opening those engine room doors maybe 30 seconds or less after it happened, the water was already up to the bottom of the engine. So I went back into the aft cabin, and water was just it was really hard to tell where it was coming from, because it was kind of just pumping in from everywhere. It was like a broken fire hydrant that had just come loose. I moved some stuff out of the bed. Because I noticed that we lost steering, I kind of thought initially that the water had to be coming in from somewhere around the rudder shaft or stuffing box or something, but I moved some stuff from underneath the bed. Initially didn't really see anything, and water was just when there's so much water, it's sort of hard, but I regret not spending more time there. But the crew was kind of waiting to hear what was going on. They had already started grabbing emergency gear, but on my way back out to kind of tell them like, hey, prep everything. They were getting everything ready, and then I just said like, hey, I think we're probably gonna go down, probably fast. and at that point, I kind of just acted on instinct. The rest of it, I was like walking out, and I saw the VHF radio. I made a quick mayday call because it was just in my face. I was like, oh, I should probably do that. I grabbed my Leatherman light knife that was right there on the nav station, which is important for later on in the story, and I clipped it onto my shorts. And then I saw the E-perb by my left shoulder turning out the companionway, and I set our first E-perb off. We had 2 E-perbs, one that we kept mounted on the boat, one that we kept in our ditch bag. So I set the E-perb off, and then we also had a life raft that we kept in a ballast. I like to have a non-cluttered deck in my boats, and so we kept it in a ballast in the salon. It was a Winslow super light offshore, so I got the light one on purpose to be able to move it around because a lot of standard life rafts are so heavy that it's not really practical to be moving those around all the time. So I helped to get that out into the cockpit, and then I deployed that. I tied the painter line off to the cleat as you're supposed to, chucked the life raft overboard, pulled on the painter till all the line came out, gave it a big yank, and then it inflated. And then I realized, probably like 10 seconds afterwards, that the tension on that painter line was borderline, it was about to break. It was unsafe because the sails were still up in the boat. And although the boat was probably a third full of water at that point, there was so much tension on that painter line. And I didn't know the stats at that point. I didn't know how many pounds of pressure it was supposed to break. But I knew that it had to be getting close to break. So the painter line almost broke. We almost sailed away from our life raft, which would have obviously really sucked. So I told Simon, I was like, we need to get the sails down ASAP. And he came over. I wrestled down the mainsail. We furled in the head sail. And then as I'm pulling the mainsail down, we kept our tender upright on the foredeck, inflated. We would stuff the spinnaker in there. It's a light wind passage, so you're always using the spinnaker and dropping it and putting it back. And he's like, hey, should we put the tender in the water? I'm like, absolutely. That wasn't really, I think we probably would have done that, but that wasn't my idea at first. That was his idea, which I give him a lot of credit for. So we just undid the ratchet straps in the tender, chucked it overboard, and then that was really important to have that tender to basically use as our kind of garage, because we had so many supplies that we ended up putting on that thing, and it ends up being a lot more stable than the life raft. The life raft is like a partially inflated waterbed, with kids jumping on it. It's really uncomfortable offshore. So once we got the dinghy in the water, I actually put on my mask and fins and I jumped overboard to make one more attempt at what the hole was, see if I could plug something in. I thought maybe with the pressure of the water coming in, that whatever I put on that hole, it would help, kind of stick there. And I jumped overboard, and I immediately saw this massive hole around the shaft log, so right where the propeller shaft comes out. I think the impact, the whale would probably use that shaft almost as leverage to just bust open this huge hole. And the propeller was actually missing, which was pretty crazy. So there was just a huge hole of busted open fiberglass. And then I also noticed a couple cracks where the skeg fares into the hull, which I didn't really get a chance to investigate that much because I was focused on the big hole right away. So Simon passed me down a tarp. I was trying to shove stuff into the hole, and then I used the line to try and tie it around the skeg to get it to stick. But holding your breath with all the adrenaline pumping, going down there and trying to do that, I did 3 or 4 attempts at that, and then it just kept failing, and the tarp just kept coming out. And at that point, the boat was more than halfway full, probably with water. So and while I'm doing all this, Alana and Bianca are doing a really good job of grabbing all the water that we had, just getting as many cans of food as we can, shoving them in bags, filling up pots, tea kettles, everything that we can find with water, and basically shoveling all our survival gear from the inside of the boat into the cockpit that we would then transfer from the cockpit into the dinghy and the life raft. So after I realized that was kind of a failed attempt, another little tidbit in the story that's probably not important, but I'll tell it to you guys anyway. We had a fishing line out when we got hit by the whale. We deployed the life raft, and while I was in the water, we were kind of scared. There's this whole thing with the pressure relief valve on life rafts, and when you deploy them, always remember that after it inflates, that's not the sound of your life raft popping. And I already knew that, but it still gets Trust me. So after it inflated, we heard that pressure relief valve go off, and we all kind of just stopped and like looked at the life raft for like held our breath for a second, and then everything was fine. But we were worried about the hook with our fishing line popping the life raft. So I was like, hey, I was still in the water. I was like, reel it in, and I'll kind of guide it underneath with my hand. And as he's reeling it in, I see that we have a fish. So we have a tuna, a little skipjack, you know, like this big. And I'm like, you guys aren't gonna believe this. We got fish. So we reeled them in, and we're like, well, I guess we'll keep them. We'll probably eat them tonight. So we grabbed a 5-gallon bucket, threw them in the bucket, threw them in the dinghy real quick, and then I jumped back on board, and the girls got into the dinghy, and we started just passing over everything, all the survival gear from the cockpit to the dinghy. And once we got everything on there, the boat was pretty much ready to go. At that point, I was standing on the aft deck. I was trying to see what else I could possibly grab to take with me, and I saw the outboard motor that we had mounted on the back, but I needed a wrench actually in order to undo that. And for a second, I was actually going to try. That wouldn't have really done anything, but I went down to get the crescent wrench. Like I went to the companionway, and I looked down, and the interior was just completely full of water. I would have had to like held my breath, dove in, and then the boat it sank like 20 seconds after that. So that obviously would have been a bad idea. So I just stood on the aft deck with Simon, like took in the whole scene. I took like 3 or 4 seconds to just like pause and just look at what was going on. It was kind of an unreal moment. And then I just basically stepped off the tow rail as the sailboat was sinking, and I swam about from here to the end of the tent to where the life raft was. And I turned around and I saw the last 10 feet of the mast just disappearing super fast underwater. And then after that, Lana yells at me and says, Rick, the painter line's still attached to the boat. And this is where the Leatherman comes in. Because the life raft, they have a knife mounted there, but unless you're used to like where everything is in the life raft. So luckily I just grabbed that out real quick and I cut it. But it was starting to come tight already. And I later found out that painter line is supposed to break at 500 pounds of pressure, which that probably would have been enough to at least tip the life raft vertically, maybe bring it down a couple feet before it popped, and enough for a lot of our burn sheet gear to be thrown into the water. So that would have been a bad thing, obviously. And then, let's see, actually I have a video here that I want to show you guys. This is a photo of, right here is where the strike was, and it's crazy, you can tell on this boat how well protected the propeller and the prop are, and it's, you know, some people are like, oh, maybe you hit a whale, or, you know, I was like, dude, there's no way. I mean, look at, if a whale was, for example, horizontal on the surface, it would obviously hit the keel first, and just the whole motion of the boat is not a realistic, the shape of the boat and the motion of the impact isn't really consistent with us running into one. And I didn't want to, I'm a whale lover too. I didn't want to hate like all the animal lovers. I mean, we went out there to like swim with whales, and it's unfortunate that something happened to that one. But yeah, it's crazy. I can't imagine having a boat with a better protected propeller and rudder and aperture. And I had a lot of confidence in that boat, but it was just a freak accident what happened. So here, let's see. We think it either surfaced, it basically was either like breaching and didn't see us, which I think is unlikely because I've been around a lot of whales and they're not that dumb. You know, they kind of see you at the last second and dip away. I think maybe there was another calf or something. We're going to get into a little bit that later, and I can dabble into that a bit more. I'm going to show you guys a quick video. We were a bit flustered of right when after we sent our messages. This is a video from the Liferaft. Oh, man. There's no audio? Can I hear it? Alright, be quiet, guys. Man, you guys are smart. Everything, the rudder and the whole prop shaft, everything under there, all the fiberglass, the skank deck got destroyed, and the shaft came off, and I put my mask and fins, and I was trying to shove stuff in there, but there was no saving it. It was just like such a weird space that anything you try and shove in there was multiple holes, and there's nothing nothing that I really could have done.
Yeah, non-technical terms,
it went down. The
boat, a giant hole in the boat.
The boat went from sailing to sunk in 20 minutes?
Yeah, I'd say less than 20 minutes probably. And we got water, we got canned food, we got a fish, we had a tuna on the line, so we grabbed that and threw it in the boat. So we're gonna eat raw tuna today, and we messaged everybody, and we're just waiting to hear back.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, so obviously looking at that video, was still pretty heated and flustered. Wasn't really talking straight at that point. It's such a weird moment. So the boat sinks, and after we cut the painter line, we didn't really talk a whole lot. It was like the next step was get our Iridium Go out, our satellite phone, and send out our messages to hopefully put ourselves in a good position to be rescued. So that's what we did. We sent our messages out for our Iridium Go, our satellite phone. We had another EPIRB, so we set the EPIRB off. We had a Global Star spot tracker that had an SOS function. We set that off as well. And then we had to kind of just turn our Iridium Go off and wait to hear back. Basically, our plan was to wait 2 or 3 hours. We had just been, before the boat sank, we had just been using that Iridium Go box. Like I said, I was talking to my mom, and just like, everyone would once a day or once every few days talk to family. So that was actually, unfortunately, the battery on that was only at like 25%, which is really bad timing. So we had to send out everything we could. We shut it off. I'm like, okay, we got all that off. Hopefully we'll turn it back on in 3 or 4 hours, and we'll get a bunch of messages saying everybody knows and we're coming for you. And after that happened, we started taking inventory of our food and our water and talking about rations. We had about 25 days worth of food, we figured. So we had a lot of food, but we only had about 7 days worth of water. Our Liferaft had a rain catcher in it, but it hadn't really been raining a whole lot on that passage. So yeah, after a few hours, we turned everything back on, and luckily we got messages. There was 2 of my friends that were kind of leading the charge. Tommy Joyce was a sailor who was behind us, a buddy boat, and he had posted it. He had Starlink on his boat, and I had his Iridium contact, so he posted it on a Facebook group on Boat Watch, and then somebody posted it on Starlink for boats, and somehow they actually found out about our position through Facebook. Through the Starlink for Boats Facebook page. One of the guys on the boat that rescued us was just like scrolling Facebook, and he was like, these guys are kind of close to us. So we heard from Tommy, like, hey, there's a boat coming for you. It's called Rolling Stones. They're about 80 miles away. They turned both their engine on. It was a Leopard 48 catamaran. They turned both their engines on, full sails up, and were just trying to get to us as fast as they could. And obviously, when we heard those messages, we were, really excited. No champagne to pop, but we were popping bags of chips and cans of beans and water and everything. Just started chucking down water and candy bars and laughing. And then it was just a bit surreal to watch the sunset from a life raft in the middle of the biggest ocean in the world. Was a crazy feeling. The stars were crazy. We're getting hit by flying fish. I was in the dinghy with Alana and like trying to sleep, and a flying fish would just like hit you in the face. Which happens to some of us on watch sometimes, but it was happening like every 10 minutes in the life raft. So we set up a watch system, 1 hour on, 3 hours off, the 4 of us to basically look for lights and make 1 hour calls on our handheld VHF radio. And Simon was the first person to spot the lights, and when he did, we were all obviously extremely excited. I took the VHF radio out and I gave Jeff, the owner and captain of Rolling Stones, the boat that rescued us, I basically sent him a message. I was like, dude, thank you so much for coming for us. Like, I've never met you, but I'm so excited to, meet you guys. We started to come up with a plan for the actual rescue. So the Liferaft had a automatically deployed sea anchor that went, to windward of the Liferaft, and then behind that we had the dinghy tied to another line. So there was a lot of potential obstruction. So our plan was to get just the essentials that we needed from the life raft, put everything into the dinghy, and once they were close enough, we were going to basically leave the life raft, untie ourselves and drift away so that when they came to approach us, there wasn't any lines in the water or anything like that. And luckily all this is happening and we're in the tropics and the weather is pretty mild, 10, 12, 13 knots. So this would have been a lot different if the weather had been a bit heavier. And then I have a quick another video to show you guys here of when they were getting close to rescue us. What time is this? This was at... Hi!
Alright, coming up on here.
I got the dollar.
Take a kick, please. Rick, how long were you in the life raft?
We were only in the life raft for about 8 hours, which is pretty incredible considering. Yeah, considering I didn't want to be in there another hour for sure. It was not fun. I think everyone has their breaking point with seasickness. I don't really get seasick, but in that life raft I felt miserable. Yeah, I did not feel good at all. So I had to go over to the dinghy just to feel a little bit better. Yeah, so what was I going to say about the rescue? That was that beginning moment. It was once we separated ourselves from the life raft, it was almost kind of awkward because it was kind of quiet. And our rescues were basically looking at these strangers with headlamps, and we were close enough to where you could talk to each other, but nobody really knew what to say. So I was like, I'm just going to break the silence and yell out, "Howdy!" And I did, and I was like, I think everyone felt a little bit better after that. The way that we did our rescue, like I said, was only probably possible because of the good weather conditions. You saw that we were rescued on that sugar scoop of the catamaran. I wasn't thrilled about that idea at first because those catamarans in a heavy sea, that transom can just pitch up and down and we could get caught underneath the dinghy, but that's what we had spoken about and it ended up working just because of the conditions. But that's something that wouldn't definitely not have been possible and wouldn't have been safe. It was still probably borderline safe at that point. But those are all things that need to be considered in a rescue situation. So there's our last known coordinates of where Raindancer was. And we're supposed to be out of here by 11:45. We're gonna go now through some actual considerations of, sorry for the verbiage there. I meant to take that out actually. Yeah, so we're just going to go over a couple, review the whole story, and then we're going to go into a couple things like just talking about life rafts, bilge pumps, ditch bags and stuff, and then hopefully I'm going to stop in about 12 minutes no matter what, and then just to answer any questions, and then we got to be out of here at 11:45 to help the next speaker get going. So life raft painter tension. Sail still up, we talked about that. That's something that you just don't think about and you don't really you don't go over at any type of safety course. Coming from my yachting background, I had to do all these survival at sea and we practice getting in life rafts, but nobody really talks about, hey, when you deploy the life raft, make sure the boat's stopped. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Having the painter tied to a boat, that's the way that we had my life raft set up with, we didn't have a hydrostatic release, it was just in a ballast, but it's another exercise to just do mentally when you're running through these emergency situations. It's always important to basically visualize them all and add that step to your whole visualization. Because otherwise, you get in a life raft and you're flustered like I was, and if she hadn't said anything, I wouldn't even have noticed. So that's just another thing to remember. Passports, we had a bunch of different ditch bags, and we had our passports. They were supposed to make it into the life raft. They were in a bag in the cockpit. That is a really expensive place to have to buy all of new clothing and new everything basically. So definitely, I would keep the passports in like your primary ditch bag with all your emergency life-saving electronics. Battery power for iridium. Another really good addition to a ditch bag is a solar charge power bank. And always make sure that iridium is charged. We didn't have a solar charge power bank, so we were kind of just screwed if we ran out of battery. PFDs is something I wanted to touch on real quick because everyone always asks about it. But I didn't even think for 1 second to put on my life jacket. I'm pretty comfortable in the water, I think. I think Bianca had her life jacket on. We made sure to get all our life jackets, both our Type 1 offshores and our Type 5 inflatables. We got all of those into the life raft in the dinghy, but I felt no need during the whole abandoned ship to actually have mine on. I mean, I was like swimming and doing all kinds of stuff. And also, if you have your Type 5 inflatable on and we were still chest high going through the boat trying to grab things at the last second, so it's just going to add a lot of drag to that. It's not really going to work out. Simon actually ended up having his Type 5 on, and he wasn't, when we stepped off the tow rail, I don't think he was ready for it. He didn't realize he had an inflatable life jacket on. He jumped in the water, and the whole thing floated. It was actually pretty funny. Yeah, this is what I just thought of actually when coming up with this presentation. Communication between the life raft and the dinghy. And we just had one line tied from the life raft to the dinghy, and if in the middle of the night somehow it would have come undone, or the line would have broke somehow, we didn't have anything that we could communicate with, and we had all of our emergency gear into the life raft, so whoever was in the tender could have really drifted away without having any communication. So if you're going to have that set up, or plan to have that set up, I would plan to have some type of extra VHF radio or an extra EPIRB or a personal EPIRB or something in the dinghy just to have safety on both of those. Yeah, obviously the boat sink. Ditch bag essentials. It's, we're lucky enough to be sailing now in the 21st century, and in my opinion, there shouldn't be any really excuses for, nobody should be in a position these days to where they're spending, a month, 2-3 months at sea in a life raft. If you're to that point, you've done a really bad job of preparation, and you've been a bit careless with having all this emergency gear on board, which there are actually still plenty of sailors that go out and don't have this type of gear. But I can't stress enough, it's just it's such an incredible feeling to be stranded in the middle of the largest ocean, and because of all this technology, I feel fine. It's really empowering to know that you can kind of, that's a lot of a sailor's worst nightmare, you hit by a whale and your boat sank. And to be honest, as the whole thing was going on, we were obviously shocked, and it was unreal, but I never thought for once I'm gonna die or anything, or we're gonna be out here forever, because I knew it was a popular passage. There was a lot of boats sailing behind us, and we had all the right emergency gear. We had a life raft and a dinghy, so I can't stress that enough. Spend the extra money. It will actually save your life. You don't think it'll happen to you, but obviously it could. And know your equipment, that's a big one. Don't just buy it. Test it all. Read the manual. Make sure all your crew knows how to use the equipment. That's another really big one. Handheld VHF radio is really big. That's a must for the ditch kit, just to be able to communicate with your rescuer. If there's a passing ship, there's loads of accounts of survival stories where people have been in life rafts. Container ships have passed by, they've popped flares, but they never even saw them. And if they had a radio, then you could actually call the bridge and hopefully get somebody's attention. Multiple ditch bags or kits. That's just basically, separating your different survival items into different stuff. This was our primary ditch bag. My main backpack still, obviously that's still alive, but having a bunch of different waterproof backpacks and basically everything you have. So all you have to do is just grab it and go, because it can happen really fast. Especially if you're sailing on a boat, not to put out my boat preferences, but if you're sailing on a boat with external ballast bolted on keel, those can have a tendency in a big collision event to basically rip the keel off and the boat can sink even faster than ours. So you just have to have a plan in place to get out fast. We didn't have a water maker, but I would definitely recommend having one of those handheld Catadine or whatever companies make those water makers on the boat. Because I was really thirsty, and we were just in that first few hours when we were waiting, we had to ration water, and I desperately wanted to chug water already. I actually did at one point. I completely forgot we were rationing. I was like, we got to ration water, guys. Go. I was like, oh, sorry about that. And then a spear gun. That's really important. Marine life, if you're going to be out there for a while, marine life's going to get attracted to the life raft, and it can actually be pretty beneficial to have a spear gun out there. We had a spear gun. It was supposed to be, I think I told Simon to grab it, but I'm not sure he knew exactly where it was, or that lazarette was already filled with water, so we didn't end up getting it, but it would have been nice to have. Talk about the dinghy. That's another thing. I'll touch on that real quick again. Just if you're going to have the dinghy on board, I was always a proponent of having it upside down, deflated, strapped down, and just for taking on big waves and safety. But after that whole event, I'm more of a proponent of having it in a ready position, just because it's almost better than a life raft in my opinion. And having a rigid bottom is a huge mental helper there, just having something that's hard. Otherwise, in a life raft, you're kind of just connected to the ocean and you just don't feel as safe. At least that was my experience. Yeah, just some more things to think about here deploying the life raft. Location on board, obstructions. If you're going to have a fixed life raft and a canister, just keep in mind if the boat actually sinks really fast, it may get caught in rigging. Probably best to have it somewhere where there's the least amount of obstructions. Fishing gear, another thing, have that in your mental checklist if you're going to be deploying the life raft to bring the fishing line in. Tying off the painter is another step. Movement of the vessel, load on the painter, we talked about that. Don't even go over that again. There's just a couple of things to consider that I didn't really think about. Well, some things I didn't think about before is the shape. So I had a Winslow life raft that was round. It was a 6-person life raft. There was 4 of us, and it felt incredibly small. Because of the shape of the life raft, we couldn't really lay out or even sit properly because all of our legs and all the gear that you end up having there was just extremely uncomfortable. I think it probably would have been more comfortable. I'm not saying a better life raft necessarily, but more comfortable to have been in a squared shaped life raft so that we could offset, one person laying one way and still have a good weight balance. I think the shape goes into a lot of life raft design and safety and stability stuff too. So there's all of that to consider. You'll have to chat with all the life raft manufacturers. Insulated floors, that's something you want to have. Ours had an insulated floor, but obviously if you're sailing in somewhere cold, that's really important. Even though we were in the tropics after the sun went down, I was still really cold, so that's just something to consider. I would have hated to have gone through that situation in a high latitude climate or location. Seasickness, talked about that. Storage space, canister versus ballast. We're kind of running low on time here, so I'm going to get into free passage briefing. Like I said, know your gear, make sure everybody on the crew trying to sign a roll and kind of go through drills. It seems mundane and not important, but it really is. So I had done pre-passage briefs on all of my passages, and just having that yachting background, it was just part of something you do. So it actually did help that when the time came and we had to abandon ship, everybody knew where everything was. Everybody had a general role. It's a bit chaotic, but it's a good starting point. Collision repair kits. I don't have a whole lot. There's not really anything that, in this situation, I thought long and hard about maybe coming up with some type of expandable underwater foam or something that could be put into a very awkwardly shaped hole with a shaft coming out of it. If anybody is an expert chemist or any of that stuff, I'd be super interested to hear any ideas on a very quick deployment. There's obviously underwater epoxy that you have to mix. There's 5200, you can do all kinds of stuff, but in a really severe situation like this, those things are likely going to take too much time, but it's always good to have a plan. In my head, I was a bit cocky, nothing's going to sink my boat. I'll always be able to save it even if it does get a hole in it, and I got humbled very fast. Okay. Bilge pumps. This was definitely a mistake or something that I overlooked. I would say I had a very robust bilge pump, a diaphragm, piston-driven pump. That it was a great pump, but the capacity on it was only like 400 gallons per hour. Then I had a manual pump, so we only had 2 pumps on board. Which, looking at that stat at the bottom, a 3-inch hole 3 feet below the water line will emit 18,360 gallons per hour. I think that was actually more than that. But the gallons per hour ratings on bilge pumps, those are basically, if you get a 2,000 gallons per hour bilge pump, that's basically just tells you that's a no head, no a certain voltage. So that's basically the pump just sitting in water, going out without having to go through any hoses, no length of hoses, no through hole. So that can actually be reduced basically by like 75% in most cases. So your bilge pumps are more there for just little bits of water getting out of the bilge, rain and stuff like that. So I'd say, just because we got to finish up, just get the biggest possible bilge pump you can possibly fit into your bilge. And if it was me, I would get as many bilge pumps as I can, the biggest ones I can, and get hose that isn't coagulated, so smooth hose on the inside. Try and minimize check valves. There's a couple things. This is just a quick figures. There's a 600 gallons per hour pump after the loss in head, and then going through the through hole and the hose, it actually is only outputting 155 gallons per hour. This is a quick thing, ABYC bilge pump installations. So the main thing here is ABYC wants you to install your bilge pump discharge above the maximum heeled water line, which on a sailboat is basically impossible, right? So you have to have some type of anti-siphon protection. They don't recommend using check valves, but if you add that anti-siphon protection, your bilge pump, that hose run is going to be so long no matter what. I think the best spot is probably on the transom if you're gonna put for your bilge pump discharge. But it's just an illustration to show that no matter what your bilge pump setup is, you're going to have a lot of hose, and it's going to end up reducing the gallons per hour of the output of the bilge pump. That's just kind of unrelated. That's the boat I ended up getting afterwards. After Raindancer sank, got insurance money, got that boat. That's a story for another day. We got a few minutes for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
You never mentioned it. Your EPIRB actually reached anybody? You mentioned
Yeah, EPIRB did reach. Yeah, there was a container ship there that was driven by the Peruvian Coast Guard that actually showed up at the same time as the catamaran, and we kind of had a choice. We were all talking over the radio, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to go with them or do you want to go with the catamaran?" We're like, "We'll go with the catamaran."
Where'd you go with that?
We ended up going to Hivaoa to French Polynesia, which is kind of the same island group we were going for, not the same island, but we ended up basically being fugitives there without passports for like a month. Another 10 days of sailing, another 1,300 miles. Yeah. What's that? That's one we get a lot. We sort of pieced together what everybody saw, and what we came up with was a fin whale or a bride's whale. I like to think it was a sperm whale, just because those are known to have the most strikes. I wanted to actually point something out. So right here is the Essex, which is the story of Moby Dick. I'm sure a lot of you guys have read The Heart of the Sea or heard about the story, obviously, but I was trying to find some type of trend, maybe a migration pattern, a longitude line. This is another boat, Lulu. They were in a Beneteau 50 or something, and they got hit by 2 whales like 3 months after our boat sank. And they think that they were sperm whales, but one came, I think, ran them on the bow, and then like 2 minutes later, they saw one coming that ran them right on their stern. And they were able to their boat, I think, sank in like 45 minutes. And then this is another catamaran that I think in 2019 went down. I talked to a lot of people trying to do some research for this. It's a bit scattered. I wouldn't say, it's hard to say there's any hard evidence, but I'll definitely say this: if I was doing this passage again, right around this longitude area, I would pay a little bit extra attention. We're gonna try. I think we've been filming the presentation. I'll try and post that on YouTube or something. If you can get in touch with me, my surveying website is eastwestmarinesurvey.com. and you can send me an email, or I can send out an email or something. But I'll probably put it on YouTube. My YouTube page, I have a few videos on there. It's called Distant Seas.
You're gonna try to pass it again?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, totally. I think at first I was like, hell no, but you know, I'm always obsessed with the ocean. And after, I think like 2 or 3 days after the boat sank, I was already back to like, I was like, all right, obviously I ended up getting another boat. I was like, I'm ready to go again. Like, what are the odds it's gonna happen one more time? Like, we got that out of the way, you know? Good. How many people you know have been hit by whales twice?
Well, Lulu.
What's that?
Well, Lulu.
No, two different occasions. Yeah. 2 different boats. Yeah.
Glad you survived. Any ideas of how the whale survived or not?
No, it was a lot of blood. That's all I can say. I hope it survived. I wish he just wouldn't have hit us. It would have been better for him, better for us. But yeah, I'm not sure. Do you have a question at the tag? Okay. Anything else? Okay, that's what we're good. Thank you, guys. I would, yeah. I'll text you a little bit. Yeah.